The house on Beckman Road. I have never told this story start to finish, not even to my wife. She knows pieces of it. She knows we left that house in the middle of the night and never went back for our things. She knows I won't drive through that part of Pennsylvania anymore. That I will add 3 hours to a trip to avoid it. But she does not know all of it, because every time I try to say it out loud, my throat closes up like something is sitting on my chest. So I am writing it down instead. Maybe if it is on paper it will stop living in my head. In the fall of 2009 I lost my job. The plant where I would worked for 11 years shut down. And with it went the only steady money my family had. My wife, Dana, was pregnant with our second child. We had a 4-year-old, Cole, and a mortgage we could no longer pretend to afford. So when my uncle called and told me about a house out near Mercer County that was renting for almost nothing, I said yes before I would even seen a photograph. The rent was $400 a month. For a 4-bedroom farmhouse on 6 acres, that should have set off every alarm in my head. But I was drowning, and a drowning man does not ask why the rope is so cheap. The landlord was an older man named Mr. Eckhart who lived 2 counties over. He met us at the property with the keys and a clipboard. And the whole time he never once stepped past the front porch. I noticed it then and thought nothing of it. I think about it constantly now. The house sat at the end of a gravel lane called Beckman Road, a half-mile off the county route, surrounded on 3 sides by overgrown fields and on the 4th by a tree line so dense it looked black even at noon. The place was beautiful in a tired way. White clapboard gone gray, a wraparound porch, tall windows with the wavy old glass that bends the world a little when you look through it. Dana fell in love with it. Cole ran across the yard laughing, and I stood there signing papers on the hood of my truck while Mr. Eckhart watched me with an expression I can only describe now as pity. Couple of rules, he said, handing me the keys. Don't go in the cellar after dark. And if you hear knocking, do not answer it. Even if it sounds like somebody you know. I laughed. I actually laughed, because I thought he was doing a bit. The spooky old landlord routine to make the cheap rent feel like an adventure. He did not laugh back. He just got in his car and drove away. And I watched his taillights disappear down the lane and felt, for the first time, a small cold thing turn over in my stomach. The first 2 weeks were fine. I want to be honest about that. Because the way it crept in is the part that still scares me most. It did not announce itself. It moved in slow, the way water finds its way into a house. A little at a time until one day you realize the whole foundation is rotten. We spent those first days the way any family does in a new place. Dana hung curtains and unpacked the kitchen. I patched a hole in the porch screen and got the well pump working again. Cole claimed the bedroom at the end of the hall because it had a window that looked out over the back field. And at night you could see, he said, 1,000,000 stars and no streetlights. There were no neighbors to speak of. The nearest house was almost 2 miles down the county route. An old couple named the Harmons who waved when we drove past but never came by. When I mentioned to Mr. Harmon at the gas station that we would rent it, the place on Beckman Road, his whole face changed. He went quiet, and then he said, "You folks watch yourselves out there." And he walked away without finishing his coffee. I thought he was just a sour old man. People in the country can be like that. With newcomers. That is what I told myself. I was always telling myself something in those weeks. I had a story for everything, a reasonable explanation for every wrong note, and I have come to understand that this is exactly how a place like that gets you. It does not break down your disbelief all at once. It lets you do the work yourself. Lets you explain away each small horror, until you have talked yourself all the way down into the dark. The land itself felt wrong in a way I could not put words to. The fields were beautiful but nothing moved in them. No deer at dawn, no rabbits, no birds working the hedgerows the way they do everywhere else in that part of the state. The tree line on the fourth side of the property was the worst. Even on the brightest day it held shadow. And twice in those first 2 weeks I caught myself standing at the kitchen window staring at it, with no memory of having walked over. As if some part of me had been called and the rest of me had simply followed. It started with the dog. We had a shepherd mix named Boomer, the gentlest animal you ever met. And Boomer would not go past the kitchen. There was a door at the back of the kitchen that led down to the cellar. And Boomer treated that door like it was the edge of the world. He would lie in the hallway and watch it. Sometimes at night I would wake up and hear him in the kitchen growling low. The kind of growl that comes from somewhere deep in an animal's chest. And I would go down and find him standing rigid in front of that cellar door with his hackles up, staring at the gap underneath it. I figured it was mice. Old houses have mice. I put traps down there, in the daytime. Following Eckhart's rule without really meaning to. The cellar was the kind of place you did not want to be in anyway. Stone walls, dirt floor, one bare bulb on a pull chain that threw more shadow than light. There was an old coal chute, a rusted furnace, and along the far wall a section where the stone had been bricked over at some point. A rough rectangle of newer brick that did not match anything else. I remember running my hand over it and feeling that the bricks were warm. Warmer than the cold stone around them. I told myself it was near a pipe. There were no pipes on that wall. The traps never caught anything. But every morning they would be moved. Not sprung, just moved, sometimes only a few inches, sometimes clear across the floor. Set down again neat and square against the far wall, under those warm bricks. As if someone had picked each one up and carried it back to the same spot. I stopped checking the traps. I told Dana I would take care of the mouse problem. And I never went down there again if I could help it. When the furnace needed bleeding I would send myself down in broad daylight, do the work as fast as my hands could move, and come up 2 stairs at a time with the back of my neck crawling. Certain that if I turned around I would see something standing in the dark behind the furnace, watching me work. I never turned around. I think if I had, this story would have ended in that cellar. The knocking started in the 3rd week. It was always at night, always after Dana and Cole were asleep. The first time I thought someone was at the front door. 3 knocks, evenly spaced, heavy, like a fist. I went down in my boxers expecting to find some lost driver. And there was nobody on the porch. Just the dark yard and the black tree line. And the gravel lane stretching off into nothing. I stood there a full minute. Then, behind me, 3 more knocks. And I realized they were not coming from the front door at all. They were coming from the cellar. I want to tell you I went and checked. I did not. I remembered Eckhart's voice, do not answer it. And I went back upstairs and lay in bed, with my heart going like a hammer. And I told myself it was the furnace, the pipes, the house settling. Houses make noise. That is what I said. Houses make noise. But houses do not say your name. It was about a week later. I was up late, sitting at the kitchen table with the lights off because I could not sleep. Just staring out the window at the moon. Over the fields. And from down in the cellar, through that closed door, I heard it. A voice. Soft, almost kind. It said, "Dave." My name. It said it the way you would say it to wake someone gently. "Dave. Come down here, Dave." I knew that voice. That is the thing I can never explain to anyone. It was my brother's voice. My brother Michael, who had died in a motorcycle accident when I was 19. I had not heard that voice in over a decade and I knew it instantly. Knew it the way you know your own heartbeat. And every cell in my body wanted to get up and open that door because some animal part of me believed, for one insane second, that Michael was down there in the dark waiting for me. I bit down on my own hand to keep from answering. I bit down until I tasted blood. And the voice kept going, sweet and patient. "Come down, Dave, I have been waiting so long. Come down and see me." And I sat at that table shaking and crying with my fist in my mouth until the sun came up and the voice stopped. I did not tell Dana. How do you tell your pregnant wife that a dead man is calling to you from the basement? She would have thought I was losing my mind. Some nights I thought I was losing my mind. So I kept it to myself, and I watched the cellar door. And I started drinking more than I should have, and the house kept working on us. Around that time my cousin Rick came to visit. He was the only family I told about the new place. And he drove up one Saturday to help me clear some brush and drink some beer. Rick is the most level-headed man I know. A volunteer firefighter. Not a superstitious bone in his body. We worked all afternoon and it was a good day, the most normal I would felt in weeks. And I started to think maybe I would been imagining everything. Then, around dusk, Rick went inside to use the bathroom, and he was gone a long time. When he came back out to the porch he was pale, and he would not sit down. He said, "Dave, who else is in the house?" I told him nobody, just Dana and Cole upstairs. He said while he was in the downstairs bathroom he would heard somebody on the other side of the wall. In the kitchen, dragging a chair back and forth across the floor, slow, over and over. And a man's voice humming. He would called out, thinking it was me, and the dragging stopped, and then something had knocked on the bathroom wall right next to his head, 3 times. Hard enough to rattle the mirror. Rick left before full dark. He did not finish his beer. In the years since, he has never once accepted an invitation to my home, any home. After sundown, and he has never told me why, and I have never asked. Because I already know. Because it was not just me. That is what I did not understand at first. The house was working on all of us, each in our own way. Cole stopped sleeping in his room. He would wake up screaming, and when we ran in, he would be standing in the corner facing the wall, talking to it. We asked who he was talking to and he said, "The man who lives in the floor." He said. The man came up through the vent at night and sat on the end of his bed and told him stories. We asked what kind of stories. Cole said, about all the other kids who lived here. He says they got to stay forever. He says I can stay forever too if I am good. I tore the vent cover off his floor that same night. Underneath was just ductwork, dark and empty. But when I shined a flashlight down into it, I swear to God, the light caught something that looked like a face, pale and long, retreating down into the dark, and I never got that image out of my head. Dana changed too. My sweet, warm wife became someone I Did not recognize. She would sit for hours staring at nothing. She stopped eating. She started talking about the baby in a flat, strange way, saying things like the baby belongs to the house and the house is so hungry. And when I would ask her what she meant, she would blink and look at me like she was waking from a dream and have no memory of saying it. One morning I found her standing at the top of the cellar stairs in her nightgown with the door wide open, just staring down into the dark, swaying a little. When I touched her shoulder she screamed, like I would burn her. I called Mr. Eckhart. I told him something was wrong with the house. There was a long silence on the line. Then he said, very quietly, "How far along is your wife?" I told him 7 months. He said, "You need to get her out of there tonight. It always wants the new ones most. The unborn ones." And then he said something that has never left me. He said, "I had a family in there in 83. I had a family in there in 96. I keep renting it because the bank will take it if I do not, but I never set foot inside. Do you understand me? I have not been inside that house in 40 years. Get out. Get out and do not pack." I hung up and I stood in the kitchen and I felt the whole house go still around me. The way a room goes still when someone is listening. And then, very softly, from the cellar, came 3 knocks, then 4, then 5, and it kept counting, knock after knock. Faster and faster, until it was a frenzy of pounding, the cellar door bulging in its frame. And from underneath the door came a smell, like meat left out in the sun. And Boomer started howling, and upstairs, Cole started screaming, and I heard Dana laughing, this low, wet, awful laughing that did not sound like her at all. I ran upstairs. Dana was sitting up in bed in the dark. And her eyes were open and completely black. And she was smiling at me and she said, in that brother's voice, in Michael's voice, "Where do you think you are going, Dave?" I grabbed my son. I want you to know that is the only clear thought I had in that moment. Not the truck keys, not my wallet, not the bags, my son. I scooped Cole out of his bed and I went back for Dana and I dragged her by the wrist down the stairs while she clawed at me and spat. And screamed in voices that were not hers. Voices I did not recognize, dozens of them, men and women and children all pouring out of my wife's mouth at once. The cellar door was open. I do not know when it opened. And the dark inside it was not normal. Dark. It was a dark that moved, that reached. That came spilling out across the kitchen floor toward us like spilled ink crawling uphill. And in that dark I could see shapes, pale shapes, hands and faces, dozens of them. Reaching. I got us out the front door. The cold night air hit us and Dana went limp in my arms, unconscious. I threw them both in the truck. Boomer would not come. I called him but he stood on the porch barking at the open front door and I could not wait. God forgive me, I could not wait. I drove down that gravel lane with my family in the truck and I looked in the rearview mirror once, just once, and the house was lit up in every window with a sick yellow light. And standing on the porch where Boomer had been was a tall pale figure watching us leave. And it raised one long arm and waved. We never went back. I called Eckhart from a motel and told him we were out. He said good. He said he would send the security deposit and that we should burn anything we would taken with us. But we had not taken anything, so there was nothing to burn. Dana remembered none of it. To this day she thinks we left because of a gas leak. Cole stopped talking about the man in the floor after a few months. Though for years he would flinch at floor vents and would not sleep without a light. Our daughter was born healthy that winter. I held her in the hospital and I cried for an hour straight. And Dana thought it was just joy, and I let her think that. I looked it up once, years later. The history of that land. There was a man named Josiah Beckman who built the original house in the 1870s. The record is thin, but I found a newspaper account from 1889 about Beckman's children, 4 of them, who had all died over the course of a single winter, one after another. Of no cause the doctors could name. And I found one more thing, the thing that made me close the laptop and never look again. When the authorities finally went out to the Beckman place that spring, they found Josiah had bricked up a section of the cellar wall. Behind it were the bodies of his 4 children, arranged sitting up, facing the room. The same wall. The same warm bricks I would put my hand on. There was more in the record after that. Fragments I pieced together over a few terrible nights when I could not stop myself from reading. Josiah hanged himself in the barn before he could be tried. The property passed through a dozen hands over the next century. And the county registry reads like a list of fresh starts that ended badly. A family in 1934 lost an infant to what the death certificate calls failure to thrive. A widow in the 50s was found wandering the county route in her nightclothes in February. Frostbitten and raving, and lived out her days in the state hospital in Torrance, insisting that the house had kept her husband. And there were the families Eckhart told me about, the one in 83 and the one in 96. Though I could never find what happened to them. Only that they came and they went and the house stayed cheap. I think now that the bricks were never really a tomb. I think they were a door, and Josiah did not wall his children up to hide what he would done. I think he walled them up to keep something in. And I think he failed, the way everyone who has ever lived in that house has failed. Because whatever is down there does not stay behind the bricks. It learned his children's voices first. Then it learned everyone else's. It has had 150 years to practice, and it has so many voices now. I do not know what lives in that house. I do not know if it was ever Josiah or his children or something older that found them. Something that uses the dead to call the living. I only know that it learns your voices. It learns the people you have lost. And it is so patient, and it is always hungry. If you are ever driving through Mercer County and you see a cheap house at the end of a gravel lane called Beckman Road, keep driving. Don't slow down. And whatever you do, if you hear someone you love calling your name from somewhere in the dark, do not answer it. It is not them. It was never them.